Hi, I'm Jace. I'm 39, single, a diabetic, and a mature age student that might be dyslexic. The official dyslexic test costs more than I can afford, so I've decided to investigate for myself into what could be my dyslexia. It all started when I returned to full-time study. It had been about 20 years since I'd been to school, so when I first looked at that page of writing, it all came back to me. My anxiety levels started to rise, and I couldn't understand a word of what was going on. My brain was fried and I hadn't learnt anything. At the end of the day, I realised I couldn't handle it, so I decided to tell the teacher that I was leaving the course. She told me to think about it and suggested I go see a counsellor about reading difficulties.
Anywhere from 8 to 10% of the students I work with have a disclosed learning disability, whether that's dyslexia or not. It's not always. We also have a lot of students that come to TAFE with a lot of literacy barriers, who may have not had a diagnosis, but dyslexia could potentially be one of the underlying issues.
So what were your first impressions of me?
You were very personable, very good communicator verbally, very nervous. It was good that you identified early that this was a barrier for you.
James suggested I meet the literacy coordinator at the library, but that was in a couple of days. So I called my parents and visited my sister to see what they thought.
Hello there.
So when I first told you I had a reading problem, what were your first impressions?
Probably a little bit of a surprise, but I can see that you've had difficulties in a lot of areas.
The imagination and that you had for writing was really great, but there was probably a little bit of a struggle, getting those words down, spelling them correctly.
And it makes sense with a lot of things now from when you're a kid, especially perhaps with learning lines, because we used to be in plays and things. I remember, was it when we were in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? You got a main role, I got a minor role, and I remember you not wanting to go to rehearsals, and I remember you even dropping the F-bomb to Mum as an 11-year-old. But yeah, I guess it was the stress and anxiety of you not being able to learn the lines properly.
I did spend a lot of time watching television and movies.
Yeah, I think it was because I couldn't read,
That's right, yes. Outside of that, you've always been a very creative person. Maybe you compensated through that, so I didn't notice.
I didn't want to stop there, so I met up with friends who have recently helped me with written projects. I Skyped Jesse, who now lives in Sydney.
Hey!
And talked to Jareth on the way to our regular coffee spot. Both these guys have helped me with my old business, Urban Effects Dance Studio.
Basically, what we did is at the end of every year we would do a dance show that had a storyline in it, and basically we would write a script for it. We would sort of piece together all the different bits of the story to fit in all our dance classes, basically turn it into a full live show.
Heidi helped with Urban Effects, but she also helped me with everyday forms.
You did a certificate in disabilities, and you had to do all this paperwork, and I was helping you with all that because you were stressed out about it.
I asked if they were aware of my reading difficulty.
That makes sense, actually, now that I think back on it, but I would never have actually thought that you definitely did before that point.
Whenever I was doing work for you or helping you with different things, I noticed you would take a while to read, but I thought you were just being slow, but it was something totally different.
Usually when you misspell a word, you always misspell that word incorrectly. But with you, it was really inconsistent. It was like some words were wrong sometimes, and sometimes they were right. It didn't really sort of make much sense.
Wait, so they could see I had a reading issue? I wonder what the signs were. Starting from Jessie again.
Like misspelling words.
You'd mess up a word, or you'd replace a word with a similar word.
Misreading like the meanings of stuff.
Well, it's not just written as well. Occasionally it's a verbal, sometimes, yeah, and sometimes it's a word that means something completely different but sounds very, very similar.
Just general conversation, I guess. Sometimes you'd word things a bit wrong, or it'd come out and I'm like going, what did he just say?
Nope. That's a Jason moment.
Oh, Jason moment.
We just used to know them as Jason moments.
Yes, I have Jason moments on a regular basis. And one of these was when I first met the literacy coordinator, Jess. Our meeting was at 11 a.m. on the 3rd floor of the library. I got there nice and early, as I do to most meetings. But as time passed, I started to think I had it all wrong. I sent her a message asking if we were meeting today. She rang back saying she'd been waiting for the last 20 minutes and to come to the 3rd floor. I soon realised that I'd misread the floor level and was actually on the 2nd floor. Yes, a typical Jason moment. Missing a literacy meeting because I hadn't read the sign properly. Over the next few weeks, I was going to be tested for my literacy skills, so I wanted to see what was involved.
When a client comes to us, we will always do quite an extensive interview. If they have been assessed by a speech therapist or psychologist in the past, then we rely on that report to actually have a formal diagnosis. If not, because it can be very expensive, we go through our dyslexia checklist and we then do our own testing as well. We always do quite a history of people in terms of their journey through reading and writing, their experiences as primary school children. We talk about medical history. There are lots and lots of things that can come into reading and writing issues.
Talking about childhood, my mum gave me a call. She'd been looking through my old school stuff for signs of dyslexia.
Well, actually, I've just found a folder with all your old reports in it, and I went through them very quickly. And you can see, from the beginning, there was a gradual struggle, particularly with comprehension of reading and spelling. I would say that in grade 2, I picked up a comment that you were still doing letter and number reversals when you wrote them back to front. Probably most students would have got on top of that at that stage. Now, of course, you did have a bit of a gap when you were 9, when you developed diabetes. So I think that's sort of a general, summary of what I read in your reports during that time.
Thanks, Mum. Thanks for that.
Aren't you forgetting something?
What?
It was my birthday 2 days ago.
I thought it was next week.
No.
Must be my dyslexia. So what else could contribute to my reading problem?
Is it hereditary?
And I know actually that I have a similar problem with comprehension, and I think your grandmother did too on my side.
Like, I do have some issues where I get overwhelmed if I can't understand something.
But you can read novels.
Yeah, I can read novels.
So what is dyslexia?
Dyslexia is a lower order phonological processing issue, which means that the brain, even though it hears the sounds, finds it very difficult to attach letters to it.
I knew the word before, but I didn't actually know much about it before you actually had it.
My impression of dyslexia was what I'd seen in films.
You always see the cliche on television is just mixing and jumbling up words.
So little Johnny, I always talk about little Johnny, who's in year 3, and he's been able to manage on the surface to read and write reasonably well.
Woohoo!
Unfortunately, if he has dyslexia, he's remembering. So he has a great big flip file in his head of words, and instead of when he's trying to spell something, he is actually going through that flip file in his head and he's matching the words. By about year 3, his flip file is pretty much full and he can't add any more to it. And that's often where those real learning difficulties are starting to emerge. So I always say, and I've said this to you as well, you know, for me, just doing some reading and writing is a stroll in the park. And for our dyslexic clients, it's like running a marathon, because when they looked at the brain at work doing fMRI scans, they noticed that the part of the brain that we would expect to light up, which is the phonological part of the brain, wasn't lighting up for our dyslexic clients. You guys are in the visual part of your brain, and that causes difficulties when we're trying to make sense of sounds.
Yeah.
So is it a depth perception thing? The words getting larger and smaller?
How can I explain it? You know, like when you slowly zoom in on a camera,
Yes.
some of the words are doing that while others are pulling away, and it's moving constantly like that.
Oh, okay.
So, do you guys think I have dyslexia, or do you think I have a reading problem?
Yeah, no, I don't really know.
No, I think it's a dyslexic thing ever since you found out.
Through the testing, Jess believes I do have dyslexia. So I was introduced to John, who is to become my tutor. He and Jess have given me the tools I need to help structure my reading. So I wanted to see what he first thought.
At the start, I didn't perceive a problem, but no, just a small problem just show themselves. Have you noticed more changes now, or since we came here?
I used to not be able to comprehend words as much, and we just did a little film, I guess you'd call it, and I had to do acting in it, but the lines, even though they were only like one sentence lines, they absorbed in. It only took me a couple times just to read it, and then I did it, and I've never been able to do that. I started thinking about my reading problem, and has it stopped me from reaching my goals?
So I don't really think it affected you. I mean, it could affect other people, but because you had that skill to sort of get people on your side and get people to help out and build that support network of people, it wasn't really an issue.
Yeah, you don't think I would have went down a different path?
Well, I mean, it's possible, but just knowing the Jason I know today, I mean, you wouldn't be content with that. You love to create stuff.
The whole time I've known you, everything's been dancing, theatre, plays, everything's been creative. So I don't think so, but you may have progressed more with it to a job that's creative but involves paperwork maybe, I'm not sure.
I reckon you probably would have went to uni if you had a better time at school, and you might have got a degree and you might have had a different career path, but you were very anti studying after year 12. So yeah, maybe if study was easy for you, you might be doing something different at the moment.
Deep down, I know Fiona was right. Although people see me as creative, I probably would have gone to uni and gotten a degree. How different would my life have been? By earning a different wage, I would have gained a different maturity level and would be more self-confident. Maybe I would be married with kids, a dog and a nice house. But I would never have been as creative, met extraordinary people, or had the experiences that I have. And I would never give that up.
Reading is integral. Like, you have to know how to read.
Current world where SMS and messaging.
Emails, do a lot of emails.
In my work, I use it in my paperwork all the time.
And just in everyday life, you need to be able to read.
If I'm really bored, I'll read the back of shampoo bottles when I'm sitting in the bath. I love to read.
I think reading is important because it helps you to
reading
go into
is
the
important to me
magic
because
Reading
I see it as
is
essential to
because
I think reading is important
reading is
because
reading is
I think reading is important.
So reading is important to me.
I think reading is important.
I want reading to be something.
Reading is important to me. Reading is important to me because I think it's a good learning experience for everyone.
To read paperwork, read the script.
And that's very important.
Anything else.
Do I have a reading problem? Or do I have dyslexia? Who knows, who cares? As long as I know how to handle my condition. I have a loving family, great friends. I live for Jason moments. And now that I know I have a reading problem and people that can help me, I can use strategies to overcome my boundaries and reach my next goal, a family of my own.
Yeah, 2610 is the name of the program that we sit under as an umbrella, and it's the state initiative to help people access help with literacy and numeracy. So people can ring the 2610 hotline, or they can contact the literacy programs at most of the links around the state where we have literacy coordinators to assist.